Hello, Adab, Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal. I hope you all are enjoying your GDAPI preparation. My name is Tushar, and in today's uh, discussion, we'll be seeing the type of economic systems. So, if you remember our previous video, there we introduced you to the concept of economic system. We explained that there can be multiple systems based on who controls the factors of production and has the power to take economic decisions. So if you remember, we built a model like this there, where we had a market, we had production, we had consumption, and we have some factors of production. And based on who controls these factors of production and who takes the general economic decisions in an economy, we define multiple economic systems. Now, as I said, based on the factors of production, there can be multiple economic systems, but for the purpose of our GDPI preparation, three systems are very important, three economic systems. These are capitalism, communism, and socialism. So as part of this session today, we'll be discussing each system in detail. We'll try to understand what are the principles of each system and what are the benefits and demerits, so merits and demerits of each system. So let's start with capitalism. So what is a capitalistic economy, or what are the core principles of a capitalist economic system? The core principle is that factors of production and the power to take economic decisions. Who does that? Private entities or private individuals. So private parties control the factors of production as well as they can take economic decisions. So the core of capitalism is that government interference in economic decisions should be zero. Government has no right and no authority to be involved in economic decisions of an economy. So if government doesn't take those decisions, who takes those decisions? It's the private parties. So that concept, where there is zero involvement of the government or where there is complete freedom to the private parties, that concept is called laissez-faire. This is an important keyword. You should remember, and you can code this in your GDs or PIs wherever required. So the concept of laissez-faire is that there is complete freedom to the private parties. They are free to do whatever they like. So if government is not taking any decision and private parties are free to take decisions, so what on basis do they take these decisions? Those decisions are taken on the basis of market forces. And what are those market forces? It's demand and supply. So essentially, what it means is that, let's say I am Apple. Okay. If I have to produce iPhones, the government is not defining how much iPhones I need to produce or where I need to produce. As an enterprise, as a private enterprise, I have complete control on the pricing of that phone, on the number of quantities which I produce, as well as where I produce them, whether I produce them in US or in China. That's my right as a private entity. Why? Because ultimately it's a demand and supply. There is a demand for my phones, and that's why I can charge exorbitant huge prices for this phone, right? So that's what a capitalist system is. Things are defined by market forces and by not by anyone else. So the core concept is, again, all these are core concepts, but there are multiple core concepts. So another concept of a capitalism is that competition is must for an economy. It brings the best out of everyone. For if you talk about the producers, they they have an incentive to work hard, to produce more and produce better, because they know that ultimately it's the market forces which define everything. If my product is bad, the consumers will shift to my competitor. If Apple products are bad, they might shift to Samsung, right? So that's why competition is there and it brings the best out of everyone in a capitalist society. Plus, the consumers have a choice. As the government, I'm not saying that okay, only Apple can produce phones and Samsung can't produce phones. If a private entity sees enough market forces or enough demand in for their product in an economy, they are good to they are good to produce. So my consumer will have lot of choices. So in essence, capitalism rewards hard work. If a person is hardworking, they understand the market and they move as per the market forces, they can make unlimited profits. There is no control on their profits. So hard work and profits are directly proportionate in a capitalist society. And capitalism always punishes negative traits like laziness. So if you are ignoring the market forces as a producer, you are lazy in meeting the what we say trends of the market, you are bound to be phased out. Now, the discussion we had right now, you would be thinking that capitalism appears to be an awesome concept, but capitalism is not always good. The real problem is that capitalism is based on the concept of self-interest, right? And when this self-interest becomes selfish interest, that's when the problem starts. So what happens when your self-interest becomes selfish interest? Your exploitation of the labor starts. So if you remember the old Bollywood movies where they would show a trader or what we say a Sethji who would exploit the labor, who won't pay them on time, and who would always take them for a ride. So that was capitalism going wrong. Another example of capitalism going wrong was the financial crisis of 2008. This is a perfect example of what happens when capitalism goes wrong. Okay, what happened in 2008? The banks were given so much freedom. So this thing which we were saying, that private parties have the right to take economic decisions. So banks were given so much freedom to take economic decisions that they took wrong decisions, they took risky decisions, and eventually they led to the entire downfall of the world economy, not just US economy, of the entire world. We'll be discussing about 2008 in detail in our other video, but as an example, yes, 2008 was a perfect example of capitalism going wrong or of crony capitalism. So capitalism says that earning profits is good, but crony capitalism is that when the only motive becomes earning profits and you forget about labor, you forget about laws, you just focus on profit. So that thing is bad. So this was all we had as far as capitalism is concerned. There is no country which is following 100% capitalist rule, but US comes uh, as a close example of capitalism. It's not 100% capitalistic country. We'll see why, but yes, it's a very good example of capitalism. Now let's discuss what is communism. What capitalism is, communism is exactly opposite of it. So if capitalism is A, communism is actually Z. So let's try to understand what communism is. So first of all, uh, communism is based on the principles of Karl Marx. You can read about his philosophies later, while capitalism was is based on the principle of Adam Smith. So capitalism, this Adam Smith wrote a very famous book which was the base of economics, I think somewhere in 1700s. That was from where the economics, the scientific and modern economics started. And then came Karl Marx, who introduced us to the concept of communism, which was exactly opposite of capitalism, Why communism case came into picture? Because of the exploitation which capitalist societies were doing for the labor. So labor was exploited, and that's how communism came into picture. So the core concept of communism is that these factors of production and the power to take economic decisions should lie with the government. Okay, so we called communist economies as command economies. Why? Because the government has the command over these factors of production. Just for your reference, a good example is China. So government has command over the economy and the power to take economic decisions, and government owns all the factors of production. So government decides what to produce, how much to produce, and who should consume it. So what's the aim? As I said, the aim is to end the exploitation. That's why you will see that in communism, a lot of importance is given to labor laws, the rights of laborers, and that's why you see a stark difference between Bengal and Kerala, which are traditionally communist, which traditionally have communist parties and communist mindset, and Gujarat, which is a perfect example of capitalist system. So that's why you will see that trade unions are very popular and very strong in Bengal, whereas private entrepreneurs and private parties are strong in Gujarat. It's because the economic system in both these states is quite different. So as we said, that government owns the economy, not owns, but government commands the economy, and they define how much to produce and what to produce. So here, government's view is important, whereas market forces are not important. So what the market is saying, that is not important. What government is saying, that is important. For example, in China, government can say that, okay, this year we are going to focus on defense. So all the factories we are going to put, they have to be in defense sector, and everyone has to follow this. Whereas in a capitalist economy, first of all, government can't make that decision. Even if government makes that decision, the the ultimate decision of setting up that factory lies in the hands of private parties. If they see that it makes an economic sense, market forces need a defense factory, they can set it up. But if they see that it's not required, they won't set it up. But in a command economy, in a communist economy, if the government says something with respect to economic decisions, the private parties have to follow that. They don't have a say in economic decisions. Now, what's the objective of this? So as we saw that, okay, it in an economic system, the private parties should have the right to make profits. But then why communism came into picture? As we saw earlier, it came into picture to end the exploitation of the labor. So the objective was that this system would end the poverty, this would end the exploitation of the labor, and this would ensure survival of all. So the government in a communist setup needs to work uh, towards an objective where survival of everyone is possible. However, contrary to this, what happens in a communist society? Since there is what we say too much controlled with a small group, so the control is rested in a small group. What happens? Corruption breeds in. So rather than these people, the government taking decision which should be in the favor of all, they take decisions which are in their favor. So corrupt practices start happening. Also, the decisions which the government take, they are based on their view, not on the market view. So the decisions may not be the best for the economy. So perfect. If I have to give a perfect example, I think North Korea is a perfect example. China still has moved from communism to somewhat capitalistic communism, but North Korea is still following 100% communism. So if a government sees the that we have to build tanks, whereas the economy needs investment in agriculture, still your factors of production would be deployed toward building tanks and not towards agriculture. So this was all about communism. Now, as we saw that capitalism and communism are two poles apart. So what's the middle path? Middle path is socialism or mixed economy. Sorry, mixed economy. So what's the concept of mixed economy? Mixed economy says that we'll have some part of capitalism and some part of uh, communism. The essence is that the factors of production and the right to take economic decisions is a collective ownership. So neither the private individuals take economic decisions nor the government take economic decisions. It's responsibility, it's a collective responsibility, and collective ownership happens. So it doesn't mean that everything happens by consensus or the everyone gets together and takes decisions. There is a it's just that there are people in authority who take these decisions, okay, in a name of collective group. So these people in power, they have been given the right to take the decisions on behalf of the entire society, okay. So that is what socialism is. The logic is that neither government is important nor private individuals are important. It's the society that is important, and the purpose of economic system is to serve the society. That's why we will take decisions that serve this society, okay. The core concept of socialism is the concept of central planning. What it means is that the how we need to deploy the factors of production and what economic decisions are to be taken that are planned by the government after multiple years. So if you remember the planning commission, which used to do an exercise of planning after every 5 years, that was nothing but an example of central planning where the economic decisions are taken based on the needs of the country. So for example, you would have heard about the, let's say, green revolution. So that was a planned economic decision where the government decided that as part of this economic plan, this 5 year plan, we are going to focus on agriculture. So your factors of production were deployed towards agriculture, towards building, let's say, tractors, threshers, harvesters, in building dams and uh, other infrastructure required for agriculture sector. So a part of the sector which the government thought is important was taken was controlled by the government, whereas the other things, let's say manufacture of pens, manufacturing of jackets, which were not part which were not in focus, were given to the private entities. So private entities can produce them as per the demands of the market, whereas the things which the government has identified as part of the central planning, the factors of production would be controlled by the government there. So the idea is that government takes the big fish while it let the small fish operate. And obviously the a good example here was the India of pre 1991. We were a perfect example of a mixed economy where we had both the private as well as the public sector operating, and the major parts of the economy, the parts which the government thought are important, were taken care by the public sector, while the parts which government thought were not important or were not too much critical, they were given to the private sector. Now, what's the benefit of socialism? The benefit is that it aims at benefit of all. That's the concept of socialism, that the decisions we take, They should benefit all and should not benefit a private party or shouldn't benefit a government, but they should benefit all. Also, in under socialism, we can pursue different economic activities which are not productive enough. For example, if I talk about India, so let's say few years back, producing tractors in India was not economically viable. There was not much demand because the farmers were using primitive methods of farming, and it was not economically feasible or economically viable to produce a tractor in low cost. But still, we produced tractors because the government gave the government produced the tractors themselves, sold them as a at a subsidy, and slowly the demand for tractors started picking up. So tractors was a need of an hour because we wanted to focus on agriculture as part of the green revolution. Producing tractors was not viable, but still we produced tractors because we had socialism. Okay. Now, what are the disadvantages of socialism? Distorted pricing. Prices are not fixed by the government, by the market forces, but they are fixed by the government. So whatever government thinks is the right price, they will fix that price. Same happens with communism. Slow advancement of an economy. Since the logic behind every decision is that there should be benefit of all. If the benefit is not happening, we'll give doles, or we will give the government start giving incentives. For example, Manrega. It's a typical example of the socialist era, right? We started giving them after 1991, but it reflects our thought process of the socialist era, that we have to take economic decisions which benefit all. So that's why there will be slow advancement, because people have no incentive to do hard work. Okay, so reduced incentive to work is the gift of socialism. That's why you would have, I'm sure you would have made some comments like that. If you go to SBI or other private sector bank, you will say that it happens like this only in these banks because it's private. It's a government bank. So why so? Because there is no incentive there to work hard. Everyone knows that we would be promoted. I mean, at least that's what used to happen. Might not be happening right now, but that used to happen. Everyone in the government sector knew that they will be promoted, so they never had an incentive to work hard. Whereas if they would have been in a capitalist system under private parties, they had to work hard. Everyone has to work hard, because that's what the concept of capitalism is. So having seen the comparison between capitalism, communism, and socialism, let's understand them by way of a single diagram. So if you have to, in one line, if you have to differentiate between the three systems, capitalism, socialism, and communism, you can understand it through this example. So if this thing represents the decisions that the government takes, and this block represents the decisions which private parties take. So in case of capitalism, this is what the situation is. Majority of the decisions are taken by the private party, whereas some decisions are taken by the government. So the role of government in taking economic decision is minimal. So government largely plays or largely ensures that the law is being followed, and it ensures this through multiple regulations and market regulators like RBI, like TRI, DGCA. So these are all regulators. So the role of government in a capitalist system is not to manufacture or not to be a producer of goods and services, but just to regulate the market and ensure that law is being followed. Whereas in a communist system, it's exactly the opposite. I'm sorry. So most of the decisions are taken by the government, and only this part, A small part is left to the private parties. Whereas in socialism, it's a mixed bag. The important areas of the economy, which the government sees important, they are taken care by the government, while the others are left for the private parties. So this diagram explains in a nutshell what the three systems are. And based on the roles of private parties and the government, we can define which system is what. So this was all we had for capitalism, socialism, and communism. Now there are few questions which you need to think through. They will help you understand not just the economic concepts, but the way things happen and why it's so. So it will help you understand lot of economic decisions as well as events of the past. And everything, all the things which we are going to discuss now are based on the concepts of economic system, capitalism, communism, and socialism. So my first question is, despite China being 5 times bigger than India in terms of GDP and in terms of economy, India is still considered to be more stable. Why? The reason is, obviously, you know the reason now. China is a communist country where the factors of production and economic decisions rest with the government. Okay, whereas India is a socialist, or let's say a mixed economy moving towards capitalism, where the decisions, economic decisions, are with the private entities. So let's say a company or a private individual invests in China. Okay, and they have invested in manufacturing goods A. Tomorrow the government can say that we don't need manufacturing, we don't need these goods. Okay, or this company has grown too much that we will acquire this company. The government says that you move out and we take over that company. So since the system is communist, that person would have no say. Whereas in a mixed economy, this won't happen. Even if this happens, that person can go to the court and can challenge the decision of the government, because we follow a mixed system and we are a democracy. Whereas it's a communist country. Another popular question which I generally ask, so what happened before 1991? How things changed? So before 1991, we were more of a socialist economy. Whereas after 1991, we decided to move on the path of capitalism. So if you see, as part of a socialist economy, we had embargoes on import. If something is available at a cheaper price outside India, we can't take that. We can't import that to India because the government had put lot of embargoes. There were lot of subsidies. The factors of production were governed by the government by way of licenses. So if you remember the movie by name of Guru, in which they show the story of Dhirubhai Ambani, it actually talked about licenses, where how Dhirubhai Ambani uh, played with the system, played with the concept of licenses as well as import embargoes. So do watch that movie. You will see, you will understand what what problems people were facing in a socialist regime. What's the role of planning commission? Rather, what was the role of planning commission? If you remember, before the Modi era, we have a planning commission which used to release 5-year plans. And once Modi was in, that planning commission was dissolved and we had Niti Aayog in place of planning commission. So planning commission had its genesis as part of the socialist mindset of India, because we were a mixed economy and we had a central planning system. But as we are moving towards capitalism, so the role of planning commission was reduced, and that's why it was closed and Niti Aayog came into picture. Do you know that SBI and Air India were, today we know that these are government entities and we blame them for poor service or for not maintaining standards, but you know that these entities were not government entities right from the start. They actually were private entities. And when India got independence and we decided that we'll move on the socialist route, as far as the economy is concerned. So the core concept of socialism, as we discussed earlier, is that the important sectors of an economy should be under the control of the government so that government can take decisions which are good for all. If we give important sectors to private individuals, it might result in exploitation. So that's why banking and aviation, which were considered to be important sectors when we got independence, they were nationalized, they were taken over by the government. And you would see that today the same Air India, we are planning to privatize it because we now realize that a private individual or a private party is best to run an airline. The government's role is to be a regulator and ensure that airlines are not charging high, they are maintaining their service levels, and they are following the law, because we are now in a free market economy and we understand that the companies or the services need to be provided as per the needs of the market, not as per the needs or viewpoints of the government. And that is why role of regulators is very important in a free market economy. So this was all we had in the session. I hope you now have better knowledge with regards to these three systems. I think all of us have been some at some instance been talking about capitalism, socialism, and communism, but now we have the facts in hand and we have the logic behind all these things, all these economic systems. So this is just a an example or a parody on different economic systems. So this shows the difference between West Germany and East Germany. By the way, do read about the German history. It's very interesting. Not important from the perspective of GDPI, but still it's interesting to know that what policies West Germany followed and what East Germany followed. So this story is after after World War II. But what's shown here is that West Germany, which followed the path of capitalism, had a lot of advancement in terms of technology because capitalism promotes competition. Whereas East Germany, which was following the principles of communism, you can see an old Fiat here. So there was no incentive to innovate because government was taking all the decisions, as we discussed earlier. So this is a comparison between what happens in capitalist countries and what happens in communist countries. So how value of goods are determined in capitalist and communist system. This is the demand supply graph, which basically says that if there's a demand for my product and I am supplying some products at some particular rate, so market forces define the price. So price is defined by market forces, which is nothing but demand and supply. Whereas in case of communism, there's always a question behind what should be the price. It's actually the government which define the price. So this image again is a parody on capitalists. So what this is a laborer and he's saying that raise my wage. Whereas this Sethji or this capitalist, this private person is saying that your greed is hurting the economy. So the parody is that he is sitting on such a huge cash pile because this person worked hard, but he's not passing on the benefit to him. So that's a disadvantage of capitalism. And last one is socialism versus capitalism. So the gate of capitalism says that work hard and keep half with you. Whereas the socialism says that don't work hard, and we'll provide you with free stuff. So what happens in this case is, in this case, an individual can grow, he can be wealthy. Whereas in this case just ensures survival, the minimum. But still you will see that people are here because socialism says that you don't need to work hard, still we will give you free stuff. Okay, so that's the parody. This was all we had. I know it was a lengthy session, but it is important to understand these concepts because the world economy is nothing but the economic systems, and lot of concepts of economics, the world economy, and present day events you can explain if you have a firm understanding of the economic systems. So thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, do reach out us on these channels, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, have a look at our Knowledge Builder course. We have lot more in that course. As part of We are covering different concepts in that course, and not all are there on the YouTube, but you can subscribe to the course and you will have access to all the videos over there. Thank you once again for listening, and good luck for your preparation. Thank you.